Hello everyone and welcome to today's kitchen session, How to Wish Animals a Happy Christmas. My name's Claire, I'm one of the HE advisors here at the University of Chester, and today I'm joined by Professor of Theological Ethics David Clough. You'll see him shortly and he'll be delivering the session, and I'm being assisted behind the scenes by Gavin and Zazel. So I'll just start by reassuring you all that your video and audio are not shared at any point during the course of this session. And in terms of how today will work, I'll shortly be handing over to David. During the presentation, you'll be able to ask questions in the chat function on the right-hand side of the screen. You can ask questions anonymously if you wish. You just need to have ticked the box to say that you wish to be anonymous. You can also give a thumbs up to questions that other people have asked and answer any questions that David may ask during the presentation by responding in the chat function. Zazel will be asking David your questions at the end of the session, and I think that's everything. So David, if I hand over to you.
Thanks very much. Nice to see you all. Welcome. So how to wish animals a happy Christmas. I'm going to start with a couple of apologies. First, this is a University of Chester kitchens session, but you'll have spotted that I'm not in my kitchen. And second, maybe you've seen the title, How to Wish Animals a Happy Christmas, and thought I might be giving tips on the kind of Christmas hat that your dog might most like to wear, maybe this one, or the best kind of tinsel to decorate your cat's stocking. Well, in that case, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. Instead, I'm going to talk about how concern for animals connects with traditions about Christmas and with how we celebrate Christmas today. And this links with the main focus of my current academic research, which is the place of animals in Christian theology and ethics. So let's start by taking a look at this scene. There, this is my family's nativity scene. Perhaps you've got one like it in a box, or perhaps you've got your decorations out early this year. And within my family, we debate a bit about what these slightly abstract figures are representing, but I think pretty clearly here we've got Jesus in a manger, Mary and Joseph. We've got three kings here and a couple of shepherds there, and we've got a rather nice star that the kings were following according to the biblical narrative at the back there. But perhaps you'll have spotted there's something missing. And what's missing is the animals. In nativity scenes, we have animals. So here's a couple of abstract sheep accompanying the shepherds. And here's a cow. Perhaps the cow's been displaced. Perhaps the cow was eating hay from the manger before Jesus was placed in there as a baby. Now, so here's a sort of familiar kind of scene. You've probably seen lots of those, but perhaps you're not aware about the origins of this kind of nativity scene. And St. Bonaventure tells us that the first nativity scene was instituted by St. Francis of Assisi, in the early 13th century. Perhaps you've heard stories about St. Francis. One of the most memorable stories about him is that as a rich young man, he took off all his elaborate clothes and stripped naked in public as a sign of renouncing his wealth. Later on, and clothed, he was looking for a way to communicate the story of Jesus's birth to people in the Italian town of Greccio. And he placed a wooden sculpture of the baby Jesus in a stone manger filled with hay and surrounded that with a real ox and a real ass. And the presence of the animals wasn't accidental for Francis. He was famous for his concern for animals. He's the one who preached to birds. In another story, he's a proto-animal activist, asking a boy taking caged doves to market to give them to him, after which he releases them and spends the rest of the day building them nests. And the current Pope, Pope Francis, not only took the saint's name, but in his 2015 encyclical letter Laudato Si, the Pope recalled Francis's teaching that all our fellow creatures are sisters and brothers, beloved by God and meriting our compassion. So that's Francis and the nativity scene. But Francis's ideas have deep roots in Christian scripture. It wasn't just an eccentric interest. The Old Testament prophet Isaiah looks forward to a time when the Messiah will come. And Christians believe that these prophecies were fulfilled in Jesus Christ. And this passage from Isaiah will be read in most Christian churches during Advent. I'm reading from Isaiah 11, which starts, "A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding." So this is a prophecy about the Messiah. And then a bit later on, these verses, which may be familiar to you: "The wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain." So that's Isaiah 11. And so what that's suggesting is that for Christians, an understanding of the coming of the Messiah and the fulfillment of that prophecy has something to do with peace between animals, wild animals and domestic animals, and peace between humans and other animals. And so that peaceable nativity scene is an expression of the fulfillment of the prophecy. When Jesus comes, there's going to be peace. There's going to be peace between creatures. And that's one way we can understand what's going on in that nativity scene instituted by St. Francis. There's other traditions that go further and see the nativity scene as showing not just that humans recognize the Messiah in the baby Jesus, but that other creatures do too, that the ox and the ass are responding to the coming of God's Messiah. And here is a nativity window from St. Mary's Church in Iffley in Oxford. It's by someone called John Piper, with stained glass by David Wosley. And perhaps you can just about see there are different animals in this stained glass window, and the animals are depicted on the tree of life, which is a reference to the book of Revelation, and you might just be able to see the speech bubbles next to each of these animals, and they're each saying their own greeting to the birth of Christ. So the cockerel's crowing "Christus natus est," which is Latin for "Christ is born," and the goose is saying "Quando, quando," when. The crow is saying "In hac nocte," tonight, and the owl is saying "Ubi, ubi," where. And then finally the sheep says "Bethlehem, Bethlehem." So they're each kind of saying words in Latin that kind of correspond to the kinds of noises they make, but all part of telling this story that Christ is come. So in these biblical passages and these Christian traditions, we've got the idea that the coming of Christ in the baby Jesus is something that matters not just to human beings, but to all kinds of creatures, and has significance for the whole creation. Okay, so perhaps I've convinced you that Christian beliefs and traditions around Christmas have interesting connections with the recognition of other animals as sisters and brothers, as in the thinking of St. Francis of Assisi, and prophecies of a time when we'll be able to live in peace. What does that mean for how we celebrate Christmas today? Well, one animal that's been associated with Christmas in England since the 16th century is the turkey. And once we begin to think about the link between Christmas traditions and concern for animals, I think the way we include turkeys in Christmas today needs a rethink. So currently about 10 million turkeys are raised and killed in the UK each year, with the vast majority of them sold at Christmas. Most of these turkeys don't have good lives. They're raised in the same sheds used for broiler chickens at other times of year. Most of them are kept inside for the whole of their lives, in crowded, dim, windowless sheds, with no chance to express their preferred behaviours. Turkey, like chicken, would like to be wandering around outside, scratching in the dirt. They like to flap up and roost on higher areas. None of that is possible in these broiler sheds. And they've been bred to grow very fast, producing lots of favoured breast meat, which means that they're bred into shapes, their bodily shapes mean they can't even mate naturally anymore. One really interesting engagement with empathizing with turkeys at Christmas is in Benjamin Zephaniah's poem, Turkey. I won't attempt to read it now, but have a look at it online for a wonderfully funny and really engaging take on why we need to be nice to turkeys at Christmas. And there are other problems with how we're farming turkeys, which goes beyond the welfare of the turkeys themselves. Perhaps you've heard reports recently about how in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil and other South American countries, rainforest is being cut down in order to make room either for grazing animals or for growing soy. Now, I only realised recently this is a local problem here in Chester, because all the soy that is imported from Brazil and other South American countries to the UK, or vast amounts of it, comes through the port of Liverpool just nearby. Over the last 6 or 7 years, that's about 60 million tonnes of soy coming into the port of Liverpool, being crushed up and then being distributed around the UK for feeding British farmed animals, including turkeys. And so we, in our consumption of farmed animals in the UK, fed with that kind of concentrated feed in these industrial conditions, we're directly linked to the fires that are being set in Brazil and other countries now, which are causing huge damage to the rainforest, depriving wild animals of their habitat, impacting on the lives of indigenous peoples in the rainforest, and causing big problems in relation to the climate. So our consumption of soy through turkeys and chickens and pigs and cattle is a serious issue. There's also the issue about the high carbon cost of animal products compared to plant-based foods, which are contributing to the climate crisis. About 14.5% of carbon emissions globally come from our farming of animals, and we can't get to the kind of carbon neutrality that Boris Johnson and other people have aspired to recently for the UK unless we change the way we're eating. And then another problem about how we're farming turkeys is the relationship to human disease risks. So I don't know if you've seen in the news just in the last week or two, there's a big problem with bird flu in the UK. Bird flu is a virus that some strains are particular to birds, but others can contaminate humans as well and have led to SARS epidemics. And just nearby here in Cheshire, 15,000 turkeys had to be culled at one local farm, and all poultry producers across the country have been told to keep their birds inside because of the threat of bird flu. And so obviously we're currently dealing with another pandemic, that of COVID-19, which didn't come from poultry, but other serious pandemic threats that have caused significant problems for human health have come from the intensive farming of poultry. And there's one more problem we need to be aware of too. In order to raise animals in these crowded, intensive conditions, one of the things we do routinely is feed them antibiotics to control infections in these farmed environments. And one really significant risk, understood by many scientists to be a much bigger risk than zoonotic diseases like bird flu, is that using antibiotics in relation to farmed animals is causing big threats that we're going to run out of antibiotics that are available to treat human diseases. And so this threat of antibiotic resistance, in the US, 80% of antibiotics are fed to farmed animals rather than to humans. That concern about antibiotic resistance is another reason to think again about what we're doing to turkeys, poultry, and other intensively farmed animals. My current research is on the ethics of farmed animal welfare, and our project has just published this report. And it argues that we should stop sourcing animal products from systems that give animals poor opportunities for flourishing, and we should reduce overall consumption of animals. So going back to our title, this suggests there are two options for wishing turkeys and other animals a happy Christmas this year. Option one is that you could choose a turkey that's had more opportunities for flourishing than the ones I've described. And if you're going shopping, that means finding one that's labelled RSPCA assured, which would mean it had been kept inside but wasn't so crowded and had some enrichment opportunities inside the shed. Or preferably a free-range organic turkey, which means that they haven't been in high stocking densities and they've had the opportunity to range around outside. It costs more for farmers to give turkeys a better life, so expect to pay more for turkeys that have had a good life, but you could offset that to some extent by choosing a smaller bird, and especially this year, maybe with smaller family gatherings, that might work out too. So option one, choose a turkey that's had more opportunities for flourishing. Or option two, celebrate Christmas with an amazing plant-based centerpiece. My favourite recipe book at the moment is this one by the Bosch guys. And here's their Christmas centerpiece, which is what I cooked last year. You can see this is amazing pastry dish in the middle. And some vegan pigs in blankets there and all the trimmings. And if you just Google Bosch Christmas, you can find recipes for all of those Bosch things online. And there's also lots of other wonderful vegetarian, vegan recipes you can find on other parts of the internet. So option two, don't serve turkey this Christmas, choose a wonderful plant-based recipe instead. Either of those options, I think, helps to connect Christmas traditions with concern for animals, with how we're celebrating Christmas today, which seems to me to be a really good idea. And so one way to picture what we'd do if we think about what we're doing to turkeys is, look, here's a little turkey joining the nativity scene. And joining in that peaceful crib scene with the other animals there. Okay, so I hope you've had the sense that there's an interesting connection between traditions about Christmas and concern for animals, and that might have practical implications for how we choose to celebrate Christmas today. And I hope that's been useful, and I really look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you, David. We haven't got any questions in just yet, but we have had one in advance, so I'll ask you that now. In terms of Christmas isn't just a time for eating turkey, so in terms of other animals, in the UK, how are they farmed, and are we seeing the same sorts of impact around the world in terms of our consumption of those animals as well?
Yeah, thanks for that. So what we do in this report is we try and go through different species of animals and look at how they're being farmed in the UK and ask what they need to be able to flourish. So we start off with fish, and then we move on to chickens, and then we look at sheep and pigs and cattle. And what we want to suggest is that people should be attentive to what these different kinds of animals need to have a good life. It's really striking, for example, that in our farming of fish, which we don't often think about as a farmed animal, there's very little and very lax regulation about fish farming. They're not included in farmed animal welfare standards in Britain at the moment, and you don't even have to be a qualified vet to give fish medication. So lots of the kind of standard protections for other farmed animals aren't there for fish, and none of the standards of how we raise fish give them any sense of environmental enrichment. So they're often either in freshwater or in the sea, kept in quite crowded conditions, in crowded tanks or sea cages with very little room to move around, and very little in the way of environmental enrichment. And that's increasingly the case for chickens that are being farmed in the UK in these broiler sheds, very like those of turkeys. And then most pigs in the UK also just live all their life indoors. And one of the things that pigs most like to do is to root in the earth. They spend about half of their active time doing that, given the chance, if they're given access to parkland. But in these conditions in indoor sheds, they don't get the chance to do that, and so they don't get the chance to live out the kind of good life that they'd most enjoy. Most sheep and most cows have a better time. Most of them get access to pasture in season or even throughout the year. But I think dairy cows should give us increasing levels of concern. So about 7% of the UK dairy herd are now being kept indoors all the year round. So they never get to graze grass. And they're producing such high volumes of milk that when you look at them, they kind of look like skeletons with huge sort of udders underneath them, because we've selectively bred them so strongly towards high productivity. And another thing we point out in the report is that we pay very little attention to family groups now in the way we raise animals. So those dairy cows will be artificially inseminated to be made pregnant. They'll be pregnant for a period of months, and then their calves are taken away very soon after they're born. Sometimes they don't even meet their calves, and then they have, a brief period. They have a period in which they're milked, and then they're artificially inseminated again. Again, go through pregnancy, again have their calf taken away, and that's repeated 3 or 4 times before their milk productivity drops, and then they're culled for beef. So this is no kind of flourishing life, it seems to us. And there are other really interesting experiments where farmers are beginning to allow calves to spend time with their mothers and milk cows alongside giving calves access to their milk, but those are very small scale experiments. And in relation to poultry, it's really striking that no hens ever meet their chicks at all in commercial poultry systems. And in a Christian context, that's really interesting, because there's a story about Jesus that he's looking down at Jerusalem, and he's saying, how many times have I longed to gather you up like a mother hen gathers her chicks? So these are words of Jesus. But in the way we farm poultry at the moment, chickens and turkeys, mother hens, mother turkeys never get to even meet their chicks, let alone gather them up under their wings. And so we seem to have moved very strongly from really important characteristics of what a good life looks like for farmed animals, except that there are the producers that I've discussed who are trying to do a better job. So again, if people want to look for beyond turkeys, if you want to look for chicken and pork and beef and fish that have been treated better, look for RSPCA assured or Soil Association organic or free range dairy or pasture for life accreditation. RSPCA assured will be slight improvements, and those other accreditations mean that animals have usually had access to the outdoors in some way and have had more opportunities to flourish.
Yeah, I think, is there any sort of research around taste in terms of, if we were kinder to animals in these ways, would they, would we actually see that come through in what we taste in the food?
Yeah, so I'm vegan myself, so I'm not the ideal person to advise on that. But one of the really nice things about our research project is that we've got out to lots of farm site visits, and we've talked to farmers producing animals, to varying levels of welfare. And one consistent message that everyone is convinced about is, if there are kind of win-win-wins for treating animals better and the kind of meat that you get and other animal products that you get from them, meat and dairy and fish, which turns out to be more tasty and more healthy than the commercially farmed sort of industrial animal agriculture. So I think there are really important benefits. And overall, this project of reducing our overall consumption of animals, but sourcing the animals we're continuing to consume from higher welfare environments, is a really important win-win-win for humans, for farmed animals, for wild animals, and for the environment.
Okay, yeah, because I think from what I took from what you were saying earlier was there's the option there to still have your turkey at Christmas if you want it, but go for the kind of higher quality, more sustainably farmed bird. But hopefully, you know, you can get something that tastes a lot better than, you know, you've got less of it, but you've got a much more tastier dinner at the end of the day. Yeah,
that's right. And I think a lot of people with these questions, sort of questions about diet, tend to kind of rush to the absolutes. If we start sort of paying attention to the way animals are farmed, some people think, well, it's really hard to engage with all of that because I'm not ready to jump to being 100% vegan. You know, that's too difficult. And so I'd really encourage people to just think about small changes that they can make. So the next time people are at the supermarket, look for labels to show how animals have been farmed, and maybe consider buying some more expensive sausages or chicken, but buy a bit less of it and supplement it with other things. Or, you know, as you say, continue to eat turkey, but be prepared to spend a little bit more for a turkey that's had the opportunity to live a better life indoors with the RSPCA assured, or had the opportunity to range outside with Soil Association organic free range. And again, if we're all together on a trajectory of reducing our overall consumption, but paying a bit more to reward farmers for giving animals a better life for the animal products that we continue to consume, that can mean it doesn't even have to cost a lot more overall, because we can consume fewer animal products and supplement our diet with really healthy, plant-based, cheaper things to go with it.
Very good. I think that's it for all of the questions now. What I will do now is I'll pass back over to Claire. So over to you, Claire.
Well, that was brilliant. Thanks so much for that, David. I think that's given us all food for thought, no pun intended, this Christmas. That was really, really interesting. So I hope everyone else has enjoyed the session and found it useful today. Just to let you know that we are running many more kitchen sessions throughout December and January. So do check the schedule. And if you want to sign up for any more, then please do feel free. I've just popped the link in the chat there, so you can all sign up for those if you wish to. But I think that's all for today. So thanks all again to David, thanks to Zazel and to Gavin behind the scenes, and have a lovely evening. Thank you.